The morning started like any other for Lieutenant Diane Freeman aboard the USS Endeavour. She woke up at exactly 0600 hours, as she had done every day for the past 3 years of her space service. The soft blue light of her quarters gradually brightened to simulate Earth's sunrise. Diane stretched and touched her toes, feeling the familiar pull in her hamstrings. "Today is the day," she whispered to herself. "First contact day. The day humans would officially welcome alien life forms in a formal diplomatic setting." Diane was not supposed to be part of the welcome team. As the ship's communications specialist, she should have been monitoring transmissions from her station, but Captain Frank Miller had personally requested her presence after the scheduled officer fell ill with space flu. "You have the steadiest hands on this ship, Freeman," Miller had told her yesterday, "and you don't get nervous. I need someone who won't drop the welcome package or stutter through the greeting." So here she was, putting on her dress uniform, making sure every medal and pin sat perfectly straight. The mirror showed a woman of 32 with short brown hair, serious eyes, and a face that rarely showed fear. Diane had been chosen for the first deep space mission partly because of her calm under pressure. Nothing seemed to rattle her. Checked you. Galactic Confederation had made contact 6 months ago. Their message, received by Earth's deep space array, was simple. "We come in peace and wish to establish diplomatic relations." What followed were months of careful message exchanges, language, learning, and cultural information sharing. Now finally, representatives from 4 alien species would board the Endeavour. Diane reported to the main reception hall 30 minutes early. The large room had been decorated with flags from Earth nations alongside newly created banners representing the 4 Confederation species. Long tables held simple refreshments that scientific teams assured were safe for all biology types. "Lieutenant Freeman, good. Let's review the procedure once more." Captain Miller approached, his own uniform impeccable. At 53, he had the kind of face that inspired confidence. Serious, but not unkind. The delegation arrives at 0900. We bow. No handshakes, as physical contact protocols are not yet established. I present the welcome package, including the formal treaty document on actual paper as they requested. You receive their gift. We escort them to the conference room. Simple, Diane nodded. "Yes, sir. I've memorized the pronunciation guide for all 4 species greetings as well." "Excellent, and remember, these beings have evolved under completely different conditions than humans. They may look strange, move oddly, or make unexpected sounds. Your job is to show no reaction other than respectful attention." "Understood, sir." The next 45 minutes passed in final preparations. Medical staff checked emergency protocols one last time. Security performed discreet final scans. The ship's AI ran atmospheric adjustments to make the air slightly more comfortable for the visitors. At exactly 0900, the ship's communication system announced, "Confederation vessel has docked. Delegates are entering Airlock 1. Diane felt a flutter of excitement but kept her face neutral. Humanity had dreamed of this moment for centuries. The doors slid open. 4 beings entered, each dramatically different from the others. Leading the group was a tall, slender creature with silver-blue skin that seemed to shimmer. Its 4 eyes blinked in sequence, and what appeared to be respiratory flaps pulsed gently at its neck. This was Ambassador Krillvex of the Thoran species, according to Diane's briefing. Behind the Thoran came a shorter being that appeared to be made of interlocking crystalline structures that caught the light and broke it into tiny rainbows. The Melnorian representative moved with careful precision, as if each step was calculated. The other 2 species were equally fascinating. One appeared almost gaseous, contained within a transparent environmental suit, while the 4th resembled an upright feline with 6 limbs. Captain Miller stepped forward and bowed precisely from the waist. "On behalf of humanity and Earth, we welcome the Galactic Confederation to this historic meeting." The translator devices worn by both parties processed his words. After a brief delay, the aliens performed their own greeting gestures. "The Thoran," Ambassador spoke, his voice melodic but strange. "The Confederation extends gratitude for your welcome. We look forward to bringing your species into the greater galactic community." Everything was proceeding perfectly according to protocol. Captain Miller motioned to Diane, who stepped forward with the ceremonial welcome package, a handcrafted, wooden box containing Earth's formal treaty request, information crystals about human culture, and symbolic gifts. As she held out the box, Ambassador Krillvex reached for the formal treaty document on top, printed on actual paper as the aliens had specifically requested. They seemed fascinated by the ancient technology of wood pulp pressed into sheets. That's when it happened. As the ambassador carefully lifted the document, the edge of the paper slid across Diane's index finger. She felt the sharp sting instantly, the distinctive sensation of a paper cut. A small bead of blood formed on her fingertip. To Diane, it was nothing. A minor inconvenience she barely registered. She didn't even change her facial expression, but the reaction from the alien delegation was immediate and dramatic. Ambassador Krillvex's respiratory flaps began fluttering wildly. The translator caught fragments. Breach, fatal breach, the Thorin dropped the treaty and collapsed to the floor, his four eyes rolling in different directions. The Melnorian representative backed away rapidly, crystalline structure vibrating so intensely that small chiming sounds filled the air. The gaseous being's containment suit darkened, while the feline creature arched all its limbs in what appeared to be a defensive posture. "Medical emergency. Medical team to reception hall immediately," Captain Miller shouted into his communicator, kneeling beside the fallen ambassador. Diane stood frozen in confusion, still holding the welcome box. "What happened?" she asked no one in particular. The Melnorian representative pointed a crystalline appendage at her hand. "You bring us before a mortally wounded warrior. Her life essence escapes, yet she stands unaffected by the fatal injury." Diane looked down at the tiny paper cut on her finger. The drop of blood had grown barely larger. "This?" she asked in genuine bewilderment. "It's just a paper cut. I just need a band-aid." The translator relayed her words, causing another wave of agitation among the alien representatives, the feline being made a sound that might have been a hiss or a prayer. Medical teams rushed in, both human and the specialists who had traveled with the alien delegation. Captain Miller was attempting to explain, but the aliens were focused entirely on Diane. "How does she survive with her internal fluid exposed to atmosphere?" the Melnorian demanded through the translator. "No species in the Confederation could withstand such a breach for more than minutes." Diane watched in growing amazement as her tiny paper cut caused a diplomatic incident of galactic proportions. The medical teams worked frantically over the unconscious ambassador while security officers tried to calm the other representatives. She looked down at her finger again. The blood had already begun to coagulate. By tomorrow, the small cut would be practically invisible. "I really just need a band-aid," she repeated, more to herself this time than anyone else. Little did she know that these simple words would soon echo across 17 star systems, forever changing humanity's place in the galactic community. 2 days had passed since the paper cut incident. The USS Endeavour buzzed with activity as human and alien medical teams worked together to understand what had happened. Lieutenant Diane Freeman sat on a bed in the medical bay, watching as 3 alien specialists examined her now-healed finger. "I still don't understand why this is such a big deal," she said to Dr. Patricia Sawyer, who stood nearby taking notes. "It was just a paper cut." Dr. Sawyer smiled tiredly. She had spent most of the past 48 hours trying to explain human biology to the Confederation scientists. To them, it's like watching someone survive having their head cut off. "What we consider minor wounds would be fatal to every species in the Confederation." Diane wiggled her finger, which now showed only a tiny pink line where the cut had been. "That's hard to believe. How did they evolve that way?" "Different environments, different pressures," Patricia explained. "From what we've learned, most Confederation species evolved in environments where physical protection was more important than healing abilities. The Thorns, for example, have a perfect external membrane that protects their respiratory system. Even a small breach causes system-wide failure." The Melnorian specialist examining Diane's finger made a series of chiming sounds. The translator device converted it to English. "The damage is almost completely repaired in just 48 hours. This defies all known biological principles in Confederation space." Diane tried not to roll her eyes. She was getting tired of being treated like a medical miracle. Across the medical bay, Captain Frank Miller was engaged in tense discussions with the recovered Ambassador Krillvex and the other representatives. The initial shock had passed, but the diplomatic situation remained complicated. "I assure you, Ambassador, Lieutenant Freeman was not trying to intimidate your delegation," Frank said firmly. "The injury was accidental and considered so minor by human standards that she didn't even mention it." Krillvex's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture that humans now understood indicated deep thought. "Captain Miller, you must understand our perspective. In our collective experience across 17 star systems and 400 planets, no sentient species can survive breaches to their external protective layers without immediate medical intervention. Yet your lieutenant stood there with her, life fluid exposed to atmosphere, showing no distress signals." The feline representative, who had introduced himself as diplomatic liaison Merzek of the Zentari, added, "There are only 2 possible explanations. Either humans possess biological capabilities far beyond any known species, or your lieutenant is some kind of advanced synthetic being." Frank rubbed his forehead. "I promise you, humans are completely organic. We simply evolved with different survival mechanisms." In another part of the ship, communications specialist Sam Rivera was monitoring the transmissions between the Confederation vessel and their home worlds. What he saw alarmed him enough to request an immediate meeting with the captain. "Sir," Sam reported when Frank finally arrived at the communications center, "the Confederation delegates have been sending constant updates about humans. The transmissions contain detailed information about our biology, particularly our healing capabilities." "That's to be expected," Frank said. "We're sharing scientific information as well." "Yes, sir, but the tone of these messages, they're describing humans as the unbreakable ones and warriors who ignore fatal wounds. Some messages contain religious terminology. I think we've accidentally frightened them." Frank frowned. "Get Dr. Sawyer and Lieutenant Freeman up here. We need to address this before it gets out of hand." 30 minutes later, the senior officers gathered in the conference room. Dr. Sawyer presented her findings first. "The Confederation species have evolved in ways fundamentally different from humans," she explained. "The Thorns have no platelets or clotting mechanisms. Their survival strategy is based on preventing any breach of their external membrane. The Melnorians have crystalline structures that shatter completely if cracked. The Zentari neural pathways dissolve on contact with atmosphere. So when they saw Diane's paper cut," Frank began, "it would be like us watching someone get stabbed through the heart and then just asking for a bandage," Patricia confirmed. "No wonder they panicked." Diane shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "So what do we do? I don't want to be known across the galaxy as some kind of super soldier just because I got a paper cut." "We need to educate them about human biology," Patricia suggested. "Show them that while we can heal from minor wounds, we're still vulnerable to many things." Sam raised his hand. "I'm not sure that's working, Doctor. The transmissions I've intercepted suggest they believe we're downplaying our abilities. Some factions are already discussing the military implications." Frank stood up and paced the conference room. "This is getting out of control. We need to demonstrate that humans are not invincible. We need to be completely transparent about our weaknesses, as well as our strengths." "Sir," Sam added hesitantly, "there's another complication. The Thoran High Council has already proposed an immediate alliance with Earth. They believe our resilience factor could protect them in some ongoing border dispute with the Melnorians." "And the Melnorians?" "They've requested permission to send a scientific delegation to observe human medical procedures. Their message specifically mentioned wanting to witness something called elective surgery, which they seem to consider a form of religious ritual." Diane couldn't help but laugh. "They think surgery is a religious ritual. From their perspective, voluntarily allowing someone to cut open your body would be like asking someone to kill you," Patricia explained. "The fact that we survive it must seem like some kind of miracle to them." Frank sat back down and looked at each of his officers. "This situation is unprecedented. We came here expecting to be the junior partners in galactic affairs, but this simple misunderstanding has positioned humanity as some kind of mythological species." "It's not entirely a misunderstanding, sir," Patricia pointed out. By Confederation standards, humans are remarkably resilient. We can survive injuries that would be fatal to them. That's just a biological fact. Then we need to make sure they understand our limitations as well, Frank decided. We'll prepare comprehensive information about human vulnerabilities alongside our healing capabilities. We need to present a balanced picture. In the meantime, Sam suggested, we should monitor all communications carefully. If the Confederation species start to fear humans, this first contact could go very badly. Diane looked down at her finger, now completely healed. All this because of a paper cut, she said quietly. I wonder what they'd think if they knew about broken bones healing. The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Let's not volunteer that information just yet, Frank said finally. One medical miracle at a time. As the meeting concluded, Diane realized that her small injury had forever changed humanity's place in the galaxy. What humans considered ordinary, the rest of the galaxy saw as extraordinary. She wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. What she did know was that she would never look at a paper cut the same way again. 1 month after the paper cut incident, Lieutenant Diane Freeman stood in a large meeting room on Earth. She watched as Admiral George Bennett addressed representatives from 17 worlds via holographic projections. The first contact mission had expanded far beyond what anyone had expected. As I have explained many times, the Admiral said patiently, humans are not indestructible. We can be killed by many things. We simply have evolved the ability to heal from minor injuries. Thoran representative raised a limb. Yet your Lieutenant Freeman survived an injury that would kill any of our species within minutes. And we have reviewed your historical records. Your people have survived planetary wars, massive radiation events, and even deliberate bodily harm for sport. How do you explain this if not superior biology? Diane tried not to sigh. She had become an unwilling celebrity across the Confederation. Some alien news sources now called her the Unbroken One. She hated the name. Admiral Bennett looked tired. Different evolutionary paths, not superior ones. Your species developed perfect external protection. Humans developed repair mechanisms instead. Neither approach is better, just different. The meeting continued for another hour with more questions about human healing. When it finally ended, Diane approached the Admiral. Sir, this isn't working. They still think we're either lying about our vulnerabilities or hiding our true capabilities. Bennett nodded. I know. That's why we're changing our approach. Follow me. He led her to another room where Dr. Patricia Sawyer was setting up medical equipment. Captain Frank Miller and communications specialist Sam Rivera were already there. We're going to give a practical demonstration, Bennett explained. Dr. Sawyer will show the Confederation representatives exactly how human healing works, using medical scans and microscopic imagery. Patricia smiled at Diane. Nothing invasive, I promise. We'll just show them real-time images of your healed finger and explain the biology behind it. Will that convince them? Diane asked doubtfully. Combined with our next initiative, I hope so. Bennett gestured to Sam, who pulled up a holographic display. We're establishing what we're calling a human resilience embassy on the Confederation's Central Diplomatic Station, Sam explained. It will be staffed with medical personnel who can demonstrate basic human first aid and explain our biology in detail. The goal is to demystify human healing, Frank added. Show them it's normal biology, not some magical power. Before Diane could respond, a young officer burst into the room. Admiral, urgent news from the Zentari sector. Bennett took the data pad and read it quickly. His expression darkened. The Zentari Defense Coalition has doubled their security patrols along their borders with our space. They've cited concerns about human biological capabilities as the reason. They think we're a threat, Frank said grimly. Meanwhile, Bennett continued reading more from the pad. The Thoran High Council is pushing for an immediate military alliance with Earth. They want to use our resilience factor as leverage in some ongoing dispute with the Melnorians. This is getting out of hand, Diane said, all because of a paper cut. Not just that anymore, Patricia corrected. News of human medical practices has spread throughout the Confederation. Our ability to set broken bones, perform surgery, and Even donate blood has created a kind of mythology around human biology. Sam checked his own datapad. Some religious groups are now calling humans the prophesied immortal guardians from their ancient texts. Admiral Bennett sat down heavily. We need to address this now before it leads to actual conflict. Dr. Sawyer, how quickly can you prepare a comprehensive presentation on human vulnerabilities? I already have one ready, sir. I can emphasize that while we heal from cuts and breaks, we die from many of the same things as other species: organ failure, blood loss beyond certain thresholds, brain damage. Good. Captain Miller, you'll lead a delegation to the Zentari homeworld to address their security concerns directly. Yes, sir. And Lieutenant Freeman. The Admiral looked at Diane. Please don't tell me I have to keep being the poster child for human healing, she groaned. Bennett almost smiled. I'm afraid your paper cut has made you too important to ignore. You'll accompany Dr. Sawyer to the new embassy. Your presence will help validate our scientific explanations. 2 weeks later, Diane found herself on the Confederation's Central Diplomatic Station. The Human Resilience Embassy occupied a large section of the station's medical wing. Long lines of alien visitors waited to observe human medical demonstrations. Inside, Dr. Eleanor Wright, supervised as nursing staff, applied bandages to minor cuts on human volunteers. Diane stood nearby, answering questions through a translator. Yes, the healing process takes approximately 7 to 10 Earth days, she explained to a group of fascinated Melnorians. During that time, we protect the wound with this adhesive strip to prevent infection. A Melnorian's crystalline structure vibrated slightly, creating soft chiming sounds that the translator converted. And your internal fluid, your blood, contains tiny fragments that stop the flow by sticking together. Yes, we call them platelets. They form clots that seal the wound until new skin can grow. In another section of the embassy, Dr. Joe Martinez conducted a presentation on bone setting. He carefully explained the process of fracture healing to a crowd of Zentari scientists. The broken ends of the bone produce cells that form a connecting bridge. He demonstrated with a holographic model. Over time, this soft callus hardens and remodels until the bone is whole again. Your endoskeletal structure repairs itself without technological intervention? A Zentari asked, clearly struggling with the concept. Well, we do use casts and sometimes surgical pins to ensure proper alignment, Joe clarified. But yes, the bone itself regenerates. Diane moved through the embassy, observing the reactions of the alien visitors. Some seemed fascinated, others disturbed. A few appeared to be taking detailed notes for what seemed like military purposes, which worried her. She found Patricia in a quiet corner, reviewing data on a tablet. How's it going? Diane asked. Mixed results, Patricia admitted. Some species are genuinely interested in understanding human biology. Others seem convinced we're either lying or hiding our true capabilities. What about the religious groups calling us the unbroken ones? Patricia sighed. Their representatives have requested a private meeting with you. Admiral Bennett suggests you decline politely. We don't want to encourage any cult-like worship of humans. Diane nodded, then noticed a group of Thoran diplomats entering the embassy. Are those members of the Thoran High Council? Yes. They're here to discuss their proposed alliance with Earth. Ambassador Krillvex is leading them. Diane recognized the silver-blue alien who had collapsed after her paper cut. Now recovered, Krillvex moved with dignity through the embassy, his 4 eyes taking in everything. Should I avoid him? Diane asked quietly. Actually, I think you should speak with him. He's been one of the more reasonable voices in the Confederation trying to calm fears about humans. Diane approached the ambassador cautiously. Krillvex recognized her immediately, his respiratory flaps fluttering slightly. Lieutenant Freeman, the translator conveyed his melodic speech. The human who showed us a new understanding of life itself. I didn't mean to cause such a commotion, Diane said honestly, yet you have. For millennia, the Confederation species believed physical perfection was the only path to advancement. Your simple injury showed us another way, the path of resilience and recovery. Diane hadn't thought of it that way before, Perhaps her paper cut had served a purpose after all. Not just as a diplomatic incident, but as a bridge between fundamentally different approaches to survival. "We still have a lot to learn about each other," she said. "Indeed," Krillvex agreed. "Though I must admit, I remain disturbed by your species' practice of extreme sports. The concept of intentional risk-taking for pleasure is unsettling." Diane smiled. "Maybe we should save that conversation for another day." 3 months had passed since the opening of the Human Resilience Embassy. Lieutenant Diane Freeman stood by the large viewing window on the Confederation space station, watching as another diplomatic vessel arrived. This one carried medical researchers from Earth, bringing new healing technologies developed through cooperation between human and alien scientists. Diane's role had evolved from reluctant celebrity to official liaison between human medical teams and Confederation species. She had never planned on a career in interspecies medicine, but her paper cut had changed everything. "Lieutenant Freeman, there you are." Dr. Patricia Sawyer approached, carrying a datapad. "The Melnorian science team has arrived with their latest crystal repair polymer. They're eager to show you how they adapted human blood clotting principles to work with crystalline biology." Diane smiled. This was the positive side of the cultural exchange. Actual medical breakthroughs that benefited both humans and aliens. "I'll be right there," she promised. "Any word from Captain Miller's team on the Zentari homeworld?" Patricia's expression grew serious. "They've made some progress. The Zentari Defense Coalition has reduced their border patrols by 30%. But they're still requesting detailed information about human pain thresholds and recovery times from major injuries. They're still assessing us as a potential threat," Diane said with a sigh. "Can you blame them? Their entire society is built around avoiding physical damage. The concept of a species that can recover from injuries is fundamentally frightening. To them." Before Diane could respond, her communication device beeped. Admiral Bennett was requesting an immediate conference call with all senior Earth representatives across Confederation space. 20 minutes later, Diane and Patricia joined, a dozen other human officials via holographic projection. Admiral Bennett looked grim. "We have a situation developing in the Thoran-Melnorian border region," he began without preamble. "The long-standing territorial dispute between these species has escalated. The Thoran High Council has publicly announced their alliance with Earth and implied that human resilience technology will give them a military advantage. Captain Frank Miller's hologram spoke up from the Zentari homeworld. "Admiral, we never agreed to any military alliance with the Thorans." "Correct. Which is why I've already issued a formal statement clarifying Earth's neutral position. However, the Melnorians are unconvinced. They've requested an emergency meeting of the Confederation Security Council to discuss what they're calling the human threat." Diane felt her stomach tighten. "This is getting worse, not better," she said. "Our efforts to demystify human biology aren't working fast enough." "I agree," Bennett nodded, "which is why we're implementing a new approach. Dr. Sawyer, you'll lead a special medical team to the Melnorian homeworld. Show them exactly how human healing methods can be adapted to benefit their crystalline biology." "Yes, sir," Patricia nodded. "Captain Miller, continue your diplomatic work with the Zentari. Emphasize our commitment to peaceful technology sharing." "And me?" Diane asked. Admiral Bennett fixed her with a serious look. "You, Lieutenant, have a unique meeting scheduled. Ambassador Krillvex has requested your presence at the peace talks between the Thorans and Melnorians. Apparently, both sides respect the Unbroken One enough to listen." Diane tried not to groan at the unwanted nickname. "I'm not a diplomat, sir." "No, but you've become a symbol. Sometimes symbols can achieve what diplomats cannot." 2 days later, Diane found herself on a Confederation diplomatic vessel heading toward the disputed border region. Ambassador Krillvex sat across from her, his 4 eyes blinking in their sequential pattern that indicated deep thought. "I appreciate you joining this mission, Lieutenant Freeman," the translator rendered his musical speech. "Your presence may help prevent unnecessary conflict." "I hope so," Diane said honestly. "But I don't understand why either side would listen," To me, I'm just a communications officer who got a paper cut. Krillvex's respiratory flaps fluttered in what Diane now recognized as the Thorin equivalent of laughter. You underestimate the impact of that simple event. To the Confederation species, you represented something entirely new, a living being who could be damaged and continue functioning. That shouldn't be so revolutionary. But it is. Consider our evolutionary paths. The Thorins developed perfect external membranes because our atmosphere once contained corrosive elements. The Melnorians evolved crystalline structures to withstand extreme pressure changes. The Zentari neural systems are designed to function without any external contact whatsoever. And humans? Humans evolved on a world that required adaptation, rather than perfect protection. You fall, you bleed, you break, and you heal. This concept is reshaping Confederation thinking about survival itself. Diane considered this. Is that why I've been invited to these peace talks? Yes. Both the Thorins and Melnorians are beginning to understand that there are different approaches to survival. Perhaps there are also different approaches to this territorial dispute besides perfect victory or complete retreat. When they arrived at the neutral space station where the peace talks would be held, Diane was surprised by the reception. Representatives from both species showed her a form of respect that bordered on reverence. The Melnorian delegation presented her with a crystalline sculpture that chimed softly when touched. The Thorin representatives offered a silken garment that shifted colors with body temperature. The peace talks themselves were conducted in a large circular chamber. Diane sat between the two delegations, feeling awkward and out of place. She wasn't a diplomat or a politician. She didn't know what to say. But as the discussions began, she realized she wasn't expected to say much at all. Her presence served as a reminder of a new perspective, a living symbol of resilience and recovery. When the Thorin representative demanded full control of a disputed space station, Diane spoke up for the first time. In human terms, this sounds like an all-or-nothing approach. On Earth, we've learned that when both sides refuse to bend, both sides often break. The chamber fell silent. The Melnorian chief negotiator's crystalline structure vibrated slightly. The Unbroken One speaks of bending to avoid breaking. This is a concept we must consider. Slowly, painfully, the negotiations proceeded. Neither side would give up their core demands, but both began to explore compromise on secondary issues. Diane occasionally offered simple observations from human history about shared resources and collaborative protection. By the third day, a framework for peace had emerged. The disputed station would remain under joint control. Both species would contribute to its operation and share its resources. Security would be provided by a neutral Confederation force. As the final agreement was prepared, Ambassador Krillvex approached Diane. Your presence has been invaluable, Lieutenant. The human perspective on recovery from injury has helped us see recovery from conflict in a new light. Diane felt a sense of wonder. Her accidental paper cut had somehow contributed to preventing an interstellar war. I'm glad I could help, she said simply. There is one final matter, Krillvex added. Both the Thorins and Melnorians have requested access to human medical knowledge, not for military application, but for healing. Would Earth be willing to establish permanent medical exchanges? Diane smiled. I believe that's something we can all agree on. After all, learning to heal is universal, even if the methods differ. As she prepared to return to the Human Resilience Embassy, Diane realized that her role in this new era of galactic relations was just beginning. From paper cut to peace talks, it was a journey she could never have imagined. 1 year had passed since the now famous paper cut incident. Lieutenant Diane Freeman stood on the observation deck of the new Joint Medical Research Facility orbiting Earth. The large space station represented something no one could have predicted. When first contact began, a collaborative effort between humans and all 4 major Confederation species. Diane watched as ships from across the galaxy docked at the station. Each brought scientists, doctors, and patients eager to participate in what many were calling a medical revolution. What had started with her minor injury had grown into something extraordinary. Quite a view, isn't it? Admiral George Bennett joined her at the window. His uniform now displayed both Earth insignia and the newly created emblem of the Interspecies Medical Alliance. "Hard to believe it all started with a paper cut," Diane replied. "Your paper cut," Bennett corrected with a rare smile. "The most significant minor injury in human history." Diane laughed. "I'd rather not be remembered that way, sir." "Too late. There's already talk of a plaque." Here stood Lieutenant Freeman, who showed the galaxy that healing is possible. Before Diane could object to this idea, her communication device signaled an incoming call. Ambassador Krillvex was requesting her presence in Laboratory 7, where the Thorin medical team was working. "Go ahead," Bennett urged. "Your presence still matters to them." Diane made her way through the bustling station. Humans worked alongside aliens from dozens of worlds. The initial fear and awe had gradually given way to productive collaboration. The research facility housed 50 laboratories, each dedicated to adapting human healing principles to different alien biologies. In Laboratory 7, she found Krillvex watching a medical procedure through a transparent barrier. A Thorin patient lay on a treatment bed while a human doctor carefully applied a specially developed sealant to a small tear in the alien's external membrane. "Lieutenant Freeman," Krillvex greeted her, his respiratory flaps pulsing gently. "I wanted you to witness this moment. This is the third successful treatment using the new synthetic healing polymer." Diane watched as the doctor finished applying the gel-like substance. Instead of immediately replacing the damaged tissue as traditional Thorin medicine would have done, this new approach bonded with the edges of the tear and created a framework for the Thorin's own cells to gradually fill in the gap. "We've adapted human healing principles to work with Thorin biology," Krillvex explained. "Before this, a breach like this would have been fatal within minutes. Now the patient will make a complete recovery." "That's wonderful," Diane said, genuinely moved. "How many Thorins have been saved by this technique so far?" 27 across 3 systems. Before your paper cut, we never imagined such an approach was possible. Our entire medical science was built around perfect prevention and replacement, never repair." They moved away from the treatment room and walked along the curved corridor. Through various windows, Diane could see similar work being done with other species. In one lab, Melnorian scientists were testing a new compound that allowed their crystalline structures to regenerate after minor fractures. In another, Zentari researchers had developed a protective layer that kept their neural pathways stable, even when exposed to atmosphere. "It's not just medicine that's changing," Krillvex noted as they walked. "The concept of resilience and recovery has spread to other aspects of Confederation thinking. The peace agreement between Thorans and Melnorians has expanded to include 3 other disputed regions." "I heard about that," Diane nodded. "The shared recovery zones, right?" "Yes. Areas where both species work together to repair environmental damage from past conflicts. The philosophy came directly from human healing, building something new together, rather than fighting over what was broken." They reached the main conference room, where Dr. Patricia Sawyer was leading a presentation for representatives from 17 worlds. Her holographic display showed a side-by-side comparison of human wound healing and new alien adaptations. The key breakthrough was understanding that different biological approaches can learn from each other, Patricia was explaining. "Humans have always healed through inflammation, cellular regeneration, and tissue remodeling. We adapted these principles to work with completely different biologies." Diane slipped into the back of the room, not wanting to interrupt. Patricia noticed her anyway and smiled before continuing. "For example, Melnorian crystalline repair now follows a 3-phase process similar to human bone healing, but using silicon-based compounds that match their unique structure. Thorin membrane sealing incorporates synthetic versions of human platelets that create temporary patches until new cells can grow." A Zentari scientist raised a limb to ask a question. "Has this exchange benefited humans as well? Or is the knowledge transfer primarily from humans to Confederation species?" Patricia nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely both ways. The Melnorian crystal bonding technique has revolutionized our treatment of complex bone fractures. Thorin environmental adaptation methods have improved our synthetic skin grafts for burn victims, The medical exchange has benefited all species involved. After the presentation, Diane rejoined Krillvex in the station's garden area. The space had been designed with sections mimicking the home environments of each major species. They sat in a human-style park with real grass and trees. "I have been meaning to ask you something, Lieutenant," Krillvex said after a moment of contemplation. "In your culture, is there a concept similar to what we call the unifying moment? A single event that changes the course of history?" Diane thought about it. "We have many terms. Watershed moment, turning point, paradigm shift. Yes, that fits. Your paper cut was such a moment for the Confederation. It forced us to reconsider assumptions about life that went unquestioned for millennia." "It was just an accident," Diane reminded him. "I didn't do anything special. Perhaps that is why it was so powerful. The most profound changes often come from simple truths, not grand gestures." They sat quietly for a while, watching as a mixed group of human and alien children toured the garden. The children had none of the fear or awe that had marked early encounters. To them, different biologies were simply a fact of life, not a source of wonder or concern. "What happens next?" Diane asked finally. "Where does all this medical cooperation lead?" Krillvex's four eyes blinked in their thoughtful sequence. "Beyond medicine, I believe. The principle of healing, of damaged parts becoming whole again, applies to more than bodies. It applies to societies, to planets, perhaps even to the gaps between different species." "That's a lot to put on one paper cut," Diane said with a smile. "True. But consider what your human poet once wrote about how a single grain of sand can contain a world of meaning." As the station rotated, Earth came into view through the garden's large windows. Diane thought about how much had changed in just 1 year. A minor injury that wouldn't even be remembered on Earth had reshaped humanity's place in the galaxy. "I still think it's funny," she said after a moment, "that all this started because I just wanted a Band-Aid." Krillvex's respiratory flaps fluttered in amusement. "Sometimes the smallest solutions reveal the greatest truths. Your simple Band-Aid showed us that damage need not be permanent, that healing is possible." Diane looked out at the stars beyond, Earth. "I guess that's a lesson worth learning no matter what planet you're from." "Indeed," the ambassador agreed. "Perhaps the most universal truth of all."